Welcome to Literacy Talks, the podcast for literacy leaders and champions everywhere, brought to you by Reading Horizons. Literacy Talks is the place to discover new ideas, trends, insights, and practical strategies for helping all learners reach reading proficiency. Our hosts are Stacy Hurst, a professor at Southern Utah University and Chief Academic Advisor for Reading Horizons; Donnell Pons, a recognized expert and advocate in literacy, dyslexia, and special education; and Lindsay Kemeny, an elementary classroom teacher, author, and speaker. Now, let's talk literacy.
Welcome to this episode of Literacy Talks. I'm Stacy Hurst, and I'm joined by Donnell Pons and Lindsay Kemeny, where each week we discuss all things or something literacy related. And we take turns choosing the topic. For those of you who've listened, you know this. This week, it is Lindsay's topic. So Lindsay, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so I thought it would be fun today to share some things that we have heard either in the science of reading community or just in the more broad kind of education or literacy community that we disagree with. I think it would be kind of fun. Maybe you've heard something and you're like, I don't think so. And so we'll just kind of go around and share and get reactions and see if, we all agree or if we disagree with each other or what. And I actually, as I was making my list, as I was thinking about it, I have about 10 things. I'm like, wow, I'm pretty disagreeable, I guess. But, I don't think we'll have time for them all. So we'll just kind of go around one at a time and see what we have time for and see what comes up. I always think it's kind of fun because I never know what everyone's going to say and kind of, makes our episode a little exciting. So I will go ahead and start. I'll kick things off and then Stacy will go to you and then Donnell. Okay. All right. So this is something that that I saw online. I've seen it from a few different people, and they said that they wished people weren't referring to the simple view of reading as much because it is outdated and it is really old, and that at least one of these educators had said, I wish people would use the active view because it's newer and more recent. So this is something I disagree with because it's actually a good thing that the simple view of reading is old because it has, there has been a lot of research to support it, and there isn't any recent research that contradicts it. So I think that is good. So it's really, in my opinion, it's not possible for the simple view of reading to be outdated because we just have more and more studies that confirm the accuracy of it. Now, that doesn't mean it shows everything to do with reading, right? We know it's a simple view of something that is more complex. But what are your reactions to that and that comment?
Well, I think you could probably tell, for those of you who are watching the video, both mine and Donnell's faces were like, what? I mean, that's foundational, right? And we've talked about the nature of research is once something has a significant effect or finding, then it's the job of researchers to disprove it. And that theory has not been able to be disproven. So to me, that is a more foundational tenet. Like, we need to be looking at it and referring to it. And Donnell, I know you've talked a lot about Steve Dykstra's bullseye. That would fall in the bullseye. That would fall right in the direct middle. Why would we discount it? Because it's old, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that seemed to be the reasoning. Like, it's outdated. And I just thought, wait, excuse me? Like, has anything disproven it? No. So that's a good thing that it's so old, and we still have research that shows it's correct, right? I don't think I'm being very eloquent in how I say that. Donnell.
What I like about it's very approachable too. So the other thing, it's anything but simple, and we've all talked about that before, and that's even said by the individuals who came up with the simple view of reading. It's anything but simple. However, having something that visually folks can approach and say, oh, okay, I think I that's making sense to me, and then follow that original understanding, as basic as it is, as they gain more knowledge, which the simple view expands and contracts for folks that way, which is really interesting. And that's not always something folks have, like a touchstone within the research or something they're studying that is like the simple view that can be that for folks to make sure, now, wait a minute, is my understanding of this in alignment? You can go back, quickly look at, see how it aligns. Yes, that makes sense. I'm solid. I think it's invaluable. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been validated over and over. And so that is something that is, a weakness with maybe newer models, that makes them not as strong as the simpler view because it's been validated over and over. So the newer ones could be based in research, but has there been research specifically on that model that kind of shows, yes, this is a very valid and reliable model? Like if you took one of those pieces out, students wouldn't be able to read, you know what I mean? So I just think there's more that goes into it than just like, oh, this is new and exciting, or this is old and so it's outdated, right? All right. So Stacey, what's your first disagreement?
So I like your first one out of the gate, by the way. That's great, because I think there are some that are so tired that they might not even be worth talking about. Like the science of reading is only about phonics. I think we all disagree with that. I think that's common sense at this point. But I've been thinking a lot lately about NAEP data and been asked questions about it. And I think one thing I disagree with, people are talking about the most recent scores, which are 2024, that it's because of COVID that we're seeing the declines. But in reality, the decline started before COVID. Yes, we haven't recovered from COVID, but I don't think that is the reason for the most recent scores solely, that we're on a downward decline. And why that matters with how we look at the data, right? Then what? It's not just, we didn't play catch up. We just started teaching where we were. And I think that's telling too. But this goes back a long time. And one thing that, Donnell, I know you have looked into this too, but we haven't seen gains in the scores since 2011, like nationally. Some states have individually, but Marianne Wolf has been in my mind a lot lately too. And she's talking a lot about screen time and technology, and 2011, if you think back to that time, maybe that was an impact of that too. But I think if we are too quick to dismiss the most recent NAEP scores just as a COVID issue, then we miss really introspecting on why they are. I don't know, Donnell, I think you have thoughts. What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, this is always an interesting conversation because it seems like we're compelled to come up with a quick answer. We want to say, oh, it's this or that. And quite frankly, we know it's a lot more complicated than that typically. And oftentimes I think to myself, what's it really going to take to move a large needle? What does it really take to see gains, not just in one pocket, one area, somewhere? And if you look at the states that have seen true gains, that lift is tremendous if you really give it its due. And you can pull it apart and say, oh, I'm familiar with this piece, or I saw this and I heard them talking about such and such, but it was everything. It was a big lift. I don't know, Lindsay, what are you thinking?
Well, yeah, I feel like there's so many factors into that go into it. And I agree, Stacey, like we already didn't have these great scores before COVID. And a lot of times I'm just ready to like move beyond the whole COVID conversation. But part of that is just being like traumatized through that whole experience of trying to teach online and everything. But, something that I have heard recently is that, oh, see, we're doing the science of reading and the NAEP scores aren't better. And that's another, I disagree with. And I'm really surprised to hear that because I think, well, I do not think the majority of schools are following the science of reading or even really understand it, I still feel like the most popular methods for teaching reading are not aligned with research and are, based in 3 cueing strategies and all the things. So I don't think it's an accurate, statement to say that. And I'm hoping that we're going to get more and more that really understand the science of reading and the science of teaching. But it's a good question, Donnell. How do you actually move the needle? Like, I know how to do it in my classroom. How do we do it as a system?
And you think about, I've been thinking about this too. Emily Hanford's reporting, which I count as kind of the beginning of this science of reading movement. We know the science of reading has always been there, but that was like 2018, 17, like it wasn't long before COVID. So even by that standard, if you keep in mind that COVID did disrupt many things, then we didn't even have time to implement the focus in a really credible way. Like you said, Lindsay, those things take time systemically. And Lindsay, I know you've talked about that you just mentioned it, being traumatized by that whole COVID time. But think about the year that, right following that you were back in your classroom. What grade were you teaching that year? Were you in second?
Second. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you notice?
I was kindergarten when everything shut down. And then
okay.
I think the next year I was second grade.
Okay. And you had exposure to second grade before, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Earlier. So that first year back after COVID, did you notice your students had massive learning gaps?
Yes. And they had missed their first grade year. And that second grade, I'm teaching them second grade. We were doing like every other day, students would come. So there's smaller groups. It was hard.
Yeah. Attendance. Like you're right. It's multifaceted, but I think that as a nation, COVID is a thing. We need to address it, but keep in mind the longer trajectory has been downward. So really, and that change takes time.
All right, Donnell, what's your disagreement?
See, so I've got one that's been kicking around a while, and I thought maybe we were past this, but I'm going to bring it up because it still keeps coming back around, and I get it from a lot of different places. Folks asking, it can be parents of students who ask, it can be teachers who ask, and usually it's private, like they'll send me an email because it's not something they want to ask out loud, but it's still there. Folks are still very confused about what's the difference between an IEP and a 504. And I have to tell you, in this day and age, you have got to be kidding me that we are not communicating and conveying this more clearly, that it is a question people have. And they're not being funny. They're not trying to be difficult. They really don't know, which tells me, wow, the messaging and education around what's the difference between an IEP and a 504, what they provide, because they are vastly different and they provide very different things for a student. And yet people are very confused about what they are. Why is this still an issue? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Donnell, when you say people, are you thinking teachers, educators? Or are you thinking just people, like general public, like parents and caregivers?
Well, so here's the deal. I'm talking both. And these are parents who've been involved in meetings where they're called in and they still don't know. They're asking legitimately. I was called into an IEP meeting. I'm still not sure what that is. Really? Our communication is still at this point where that was not clear? Anyway, what would it take? We're talking about changing reading and our understanding of reading and all this evidence that we have, training that teachers have received, and we still are pushing against numbers and statistics. Well, I think squarely right up there is if we still don't have a foundational understanding of IEPs and 504s, I think that's a big part of our problem still.
Which I think probably lends itself to maybe something I would disagree with as a general educator, that those things aren't your concern, right? I disagree with that. And parents and everybody needs to be aware of that. So I do see the issue there. It is systemic because I know we're prone to just focus on what's right in front of us, but we all need to know the difference.
Yeah. And it makes me think, like, because if you go into special education, for sure that is covered. And I wonder in general education and pre-service teachers, is that covered very well about an IEP versus 504, you know?
And how much communication is happening in a school amongst the various groups, because there should be plenty of communication, because the students are all of our students. And so clearly we're not communicating well enough if we think that, as you say, Stacy, that occurs maybe in another part of the school. I don't even need to be involved with it. No, that's not true. Every student is all our students. So we need to know, we should be clear. And that's really interesting to me. The other thing is they provide very vastly different things. And if people are unclear about what they're providing, then how well are we providing it is another question, right?
Yeah. And like teacher knowledge being there so that they can provide ideas, or they notice when you have a student that may benefit from a 504, right? Or that you're like, oh, I think we need to add some things onto their IEP or whatever. I know for my own son, it was so helpful when the teachers really understood and could give us some ideas or some things, or like, oh, we need to change that. Or even me as a teacher, when I've seen an IEP and I've been like, oh my gosh, they like this accommodation. So not to like, so an IEP will have accommodations on it, right? And I'll be like, oh, this accommodation is not really needed for this student, but I think this one is. And just feeling, confident to be able to really like have your voice heard and input ideas there.
And to know the difference between actually knowing what an accommodation is, right?
Yeah.
And how, as a teacher, you're responsible for.
And how that's different than intervention. That's something that I'm like, and with my son, I'm always like, yeah, he needs accommodations. He also needs interventions. So I hope interventions are being provided as well.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes, I was recently aware of a IEP meeting where the goal was around oral reading fluency, words correct per minute. But my thinking was, I feel like, a knowledgeable teacher would look at that particular student and say, his issue isn't rate, it's accuracy. So let's set a goal that is, really measurable in that area. And as a teacher, knowing how to address that, knowing the difference between, and that having everybody in that team aware of that too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so lest somebody thinks, you're going to have this conversation again, I just want you to think about this. The new definition by the International Dyslexia Association of dyslexia. So if you haven't seen it, please go to the website, familiarize yourself with the new definition. But it does bring up the point that there will be students, because we talk a little bit, we get into discussing nuance of dyslexia a bit, and the definition kind of leads us into thinking about this a bit. It also talks about various areas that hadn't been mentioned before in a definition that could be impacting reading, so it gets us thinking in those ways. I just want us to be having really good, clear conversations about the fact that there will be students who will need these additional resources, 504s and IEPs, in order to be successful. If we don't understand where students are, what they need, and how prolonged their challenges may be, because again, when we're talking about dyslexia, it can be severe and persistent, then we're never going to meet the needs of those students. So that's how important this conversation, I think, is.
For over 40 years, Reading Horizons has helped educators build strong literacy foundations for students. Now with Ascend, they're supporting every learner and every tier through one unified solution. Ascend Mastery, a comprehensive pre-K through 5 core literacy program, and Ascend Focus, an adaptive K through 12 intervention. Learn more and explore how you can bring Ascend to your schools at readinghorizons.com/ascend. Implementations begin in the 2026 school year.
All right, so it's back to me. And I have seen educators telling other educators as well as parents not to bother teaching the alphabet song, the normal A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, saying not to do it, different reasons. They want to do like a different version. There's like another song. Oh, do the better alphabet song or whatever. I don't know what it is. Instead, because it has sounds, I think it focuses on the sounds of the letters. Okay, I heard that, oh, well, they don't need to know the names anyways in order to read, so your time would be better spent teaching them the sounds than the song. I heard like, oh, it teaches them elemento. They think elemento is like a word, and it's not L-M-N-O. Okay, so, and that like, oh, well, I guess I mentioned that just to be focusing on the sounds instead. Okay, so that's something I disagree with. I think that there is still a lot of value to having students know the alphabet song. There's nothing wrong with learning the names of the letters. Most students can learn the names just fine as well as the sounds. Parents are familiar with the alphabet song. The students are going to be singing it from the time they're like 2 or 3. There's a lot of products out there that like little toys and things that do the song. I think it's great. As I used to teach kindergarten, right now I'm first. It's really not that hard. Yes, students come in and they think elemento is something, but you slow them down and you point to each letter as they go L, M, N, O. So I don't think it's the end of the world. And yes, you can teach another song in addition if you want, and you can teach a song that has the sounds or whatever. But I think the alphabet song is still very helpful for alphabetical order. You want them to be able to go A to Z really quickly. So there's a lot of reasons that I think it's perfectly fine to teach the alphabet song. Okay, any thoughts on that?
I agree. And there has been some conversation about what order to introduce the alphabet in generally, right? And what is the harm in starting with that? Because it gives the students an anchor. I agree with everything you said, Lindsay. And as you were talking about having them point to the letters and recognize L, M, N, O is separate. They're separate letters. That's print concepts. Why wouldn't we do that, right? The other thing is there is a substantial amount of research that says knowing the letter names, it has a direct correlation with reading proficiency in the future. So we can't dismiss that. And I know you can teach the letter names out of order, but I feel like that's a really efficient way to do it. And then like your point about alphabetic order, you're going to need to know that. Even in today's world, you need to know alphabetical order. And apparently you need to know how to say it too. Yeah.
It's interesting because my adult students, I will ask them, how difficult is it for you to have someone tell you the spelling of a name and you write it in the correct order? And they say, I can't do it. That's one of the things I can't do. So letter name is very important. I ask that one thing because it will happen to you at some point in your life. Here's an address. Oh, I don't know how to spell that address. Could you give it to me? Well, you spell it L-I, and they begin to give you letter names. They don't give you letter sounds. And all of my students have said that was dropped off early. We never talked about it again. Alphabetical order. We didn't talk about letter names again. I've been struggling with this whole alphabet soup of what it is I'm supposed to be doing with it. And that hasn't been a piece of it. And when I bring that up, they all go, thank you for talking about it. It's so embarrassing. And so we practice. We go back to A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We practice it. We get very quick with it. We do it backwards, forwards. We're able to do them in between. We get letter names. And I'll tell you, 6 months into intervention, all of the other things that we're doing, this takes us just a few minutes. Again, I'm not advocating 20 minutes of this. It's just a few minutes. But 6 months in, my students are saying, oh my gosh, I'm not terrified anymore when I have to ask how to spell something. They won't be able to write it down. Yeah. But that's a skill we get asked to do. And this very easily does it, right? Getting alphabetical order very easily covers that for folks.
Yeah. Oh, and more, I do see that. Oh, they don't need to know the names. Like, but you know what? Most students, most kindergartners, in my experience, have no problem learning both. There might be a couple that do. And okay, you can emphasize sounds over names, but don't neglect the names at all. Like Donnell, I like that you said, you have to go back and work on that. And you know what? I love Linda Farrell from Readsters, and she shares this great activity where they're singing the ABC song, the normal alphabet song, and she has this page with the letters, and it like matches the rhythm of the song. So it would be like A, B, C, D is all on one line, E, F, G, right? And then it's like H, I, the next line, J, K, L. I don't know if I'm saying that right. But anyways, a certain amount of letters on each line that coordinates with the song. And so then they sing and touch as they're going. And I think that's great. That would be a great little intervention for someone like Donnell, like you're saying, you have a student that still doesn't know their names, just doing that.
Yep.
Okay, Stacey, back to you.
Fun fact, I was a first grade teacher when I realized that the ABC song is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star tune.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are like, yeah, we knew that. I didn't. And it was a first grader who pointed that out to me. So you're never too old to learn new things. Anyway, okay, this happened to me. I don't think this is a popular opinion, at least not in the circles that we run in. I know it's not. But I have to tell you the context. I had to go to the DMV the other day, which is always delightful, I'm sure. And for most people, there was a line. So in line, I am talking, this man starts talking to me. He's in line with me. He asked me what I do, tell him that I teach literacy. And he said, oh, you're, how did he word it? Let me think if I can think of it. You're a prophet of a dying religion. And I said, what? And he said, we're not going to need to know how to read anymore because we have all of this technology and, we can outsource tons of this. And he goes on to tell me about his cousin who's dyslexic and the whole world has been open to him because we have speech to text and AI to help him through the world. And he said, and this guy, very philosophical, said, he's a very philosophical guy, I can tell. He said, and by the way, most of the world's existence, we haven't been able to read. And so, we do teach that. The brain wasn't wired to read. But I said, no, but we have been talking since the beginning of time. And print is language in a visual form. We talked about that. So I thought of that really threw me. I was shooken, as they say. I was shook. Yeah. But I was thinking, thankfully, that's not the prevalent thinking as far as I know. But what if it becomes that? We really do need language. Those large language models, and print is a form of that. How else do we stay immortal too? Like print is everlasting, right? So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Oh, I just think it's silly. Of course. Like, what are you going to do driving down the road? You have to read the signs, It's like when people say writing is going to be obsolete too. And people are, I'm like, no, I still write my grocery list on a paper. You still write a card to someone. You still write, some people write in a journal. I don't, but, and you have kids are drawing pictures and they're writing notes to people. And I mean, I don't think any of that is going away, even with technology.
True. And heaven forbid you're ever in this situation where you need to know how to write SOS. And how else are you going to communicate that?
Okay, this has really got me thinking about Stanislaus Dehaene and also Marianne Wolf, talking about the very real brain differences between a brain where they have reading and reading has occurred, and a brain where there is no reading. And there are differences, which is interesting. So it'd be interesting to see. And I've heard Marianne Wolf ask this question too on some podcasts recently, and she shudders, of course. But there is something very deeply personal that occurs between you and a page, particularly when you can read and it isn't vocalized outside. But those are those quiet moments that occur between the individual and the page. And we have benefited greatly from those. So it's just really interesting, fascinating. And yet I do have folks in my family, right, with dyslexia. And so I'm very aware of the many advances we have made and how that can make life so much easier to navigate when we have these advancements for folks who have like a reading difficulty like dyslexia. And those are important. I would never downplay that too. But I would also it would be interesting to ask my son, who likes to, pontificate a bit about the written word as well as spoken language, and ask him what he thinks of that, because he's gained so much from a page, which is interesting.
Yeah, you'll have to ask him and report back.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really had me thinking, and I had to manage my reaction because, as you can imagine, I was like, no, we're going to continue to need this.
All right, Donnell, do you have another disagreement to share?
Do I have a disagreement? Because
Yeah.
mine's just a statement of
No.
dissatisfaction.
No, I didn't know how many you had.
Well, I've got one more that I've just got to
Okay.
bring up because I still keep seeing it and it's driving me crazy. Why don't we just vow today to never use these words again in an educational setting? Wait and see. Never use it again. Vow to never do that again. Wait and see. No. No. Gather today what you can see and do something about it. There's no wait. I see it. I do something about it. That's what I want to change that to.
See something, do something.
See it, do something. That one drives me crazy. Never want to hear it. So from today on, everybody, we're making this commitment. We're never going to say that again in an educational setting. Wait and see does not exist.
It's frustrating for me as a first grade teacher when I see a student that, that just really struggles, and I'm trying to do all the things. I'm providing interventions. We're making progress, but I feel like they still need more support going forward, especially in other years of schooling. And so I try to get testing done to see if they will qualify for an IEP. And what's frustrating to me is it seems like they usually don't, even though I know it, and it's kind of, there is this idea of let's wait and see. And I feel like, why do we wait till they're 2 to 3 years behind? Like, I'm telling you right now, it is taking so much work for them to learn each new letter, each new spelling. I can see down the line, I'm not like saying, I'm not saying there's like no hope for a child or something, but when there's so much work going into it, you just want to get all these supports set up right away, especially as a mother who wished, we had certain supports right away. And so it's just so frustrating when it seems like, I don't know if it's the system, but sometimes it's like you can't get them in. The testing doesn't show they're far enough behind, even though you as a teacher know, and even the parent knows, hey, it's taken this many years for them to learn their letters or whatever, So it's so that resonates with me, Donnell. I hate this wait and see.
Lindsay, I almost wish there was a box you could check where it says severe and persistent.
Yeah.
Yes, this is severe and persistent. Can we make it something we can all understand? Because that's what you're just talking about. All that effort, that's severe and it's persistent.
Okay, we're back to me. So maybe we have time for one more each. Donnell, we can always skip yours because as I said, I have like 10 of them, so I could just do the next one on my list. Okay. Okay, so this is something that you guys know because I've mentioned this to you when we heard it, and it kind of it just rubbed me the wrong way when I heard it. And we were at a conference together. I heard it a couple different times at this conference, and then again I heard it on a podcast after the conference, and I found out the idea of this comes from the author John Maxwell. So I don't want to so this is something, I guess, that comes from John Maxwell, the author, and I disagree with it. All right. And it's this idea of the leadership lid. And so the speakers who were talking about this were talking about what it takes to be a good leader. And they're basically saying there's this, no one is going to be better than you. This is how it came across. You're a leader and you can't, I get the sentiment. They're kind of trying to say, as a leader, you want to keep growing so that the people who, I guess, follow you, right? The people you're leading keep growing as well. But, and so they said, this is this leadership lid. And they would kind of do this with their hands and they're never going to rise above this. They're never going to rise above you. And I'm just like, ew, that just really rubs me the wrong way, because I think a good leader is helping that person achieve their potential and go higher than you as a leader, right? You're just, and there's all different areas that you can be amazing at. And so just because you are a leader doesn't mean you're great at everything. I've always appreciated, for example, when I had a principal who knows who to rely on for certain things, right? The principal knows they don't have to be, I mean, of course we want our leaders to keep learning and growing, but a good leader knows who to go to, who are the experts. And then I could be considered a leader because I'm like a teacher leader. And I've written books, and all of us, we have this podcast. I don't think that I'm the best at everything. And my whole goal, like with writing books and doing this podcast, is to help others be the very best they can. And that's going to be better than me. You know what I mean? It's like, so I hate the whole idea. A great leader doesn't limit the potential of others, but helps them rise as high as possible. So that's my beef with the leadership lid. Any thoughts on that?
Just fond memories from when we first heard it, because you reacted to that immediately.
I was like, oh no, like what is that?
And it makes me think of that, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
Really good leadership lifts everybody. You see people that you never thought would be doing something or going out for this. And that's good leadership. That's a sign to me of really good leadership in a building, is when you see teachers that are reaching for things they hadn't reached for before. We're thinking of ourselves as accomplishing this or that goal. And it's not all coming directly from the one leader in the building, or say if it's the principal in that building, but it spreads. And that's good leadership, is when you see everybody being elevated from that. And like you said, you don't know where some of the stars are going to be. Maybe you haven't seen them yet, but under good leadership, they could be there.
Yeah. Okay, Stacey, do you have a last disagreement to share?
I do, but I'm kind of in the same boat as Donnell. Like, I'm still actually processing this disagreement. I think I'm landing on a certain, but I have heard it, and I think I've even said, you don't have to like reading to teach reading. And I think I'm disagreeing with that. I feel like that's a critical piece. And the more that, I look at all the competencies that I'm addressing as a professor, and my students sitting in front of me, many of them say, oh, I don't like to read. I haven't read a book in years. And that's what prompts me to say, I should set a standard or a competency. The state doesn't, but I should set my own of getting my students to like reading again or at all, right? Because I think that matters when you're teaching reading. I'm not 100% on that, but I think over the years, I think we've had this conversation before. Do you need to like reading to teach it? I know the critical thing is that our students need to be able to read, right? But I think I'm moving more to the, yes, you do need to like it. Donnell.
And Stacey, you have evidence. So I just got this from the library because I'd heard about it and I want to just read it. Raising Kids Who Read by Daniel Willingham. And I'd say there's a lot of evidence inside that book to say, yes, you do. Or if you don't love it, fake it, because kids need to think you love it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Ooh, when I thought I had bought all the books.
Right.
I feel like I need to get that one.
And here's a statement in the book that I think will tell us why it's so valuable. He's got a 20th century writer, Richard Wright, that he quotes in here. And Wright describes learning to read. And he describes hearing somebody reading, and he was bewitched, is what he calls it. See, and Willingham says there's so much value to being bewitched by something. And here's his quote: "My sense of life deepened, and the feel of things was different somehow. The sensations the story aroused in me were never to leave me."
That makes sense.
Yeah,
and I don't want to leave the impression that most of my students don't like reading. Many of them do. In fact, I was having a conversation with a student in my office just last week, and she was saying, I wish I could read the Harry Potter books again for the first time. And what you just read to us, Donnell, that's the experience we're talking about. And some of my students haven't had that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I don't think you have to love reading yourself in order to teach it well. I do think you should fake it, though, like Donnell said. So if you don't like reading, I do think you just need to fake it and pretend like you do. Because it also just makes me think about the other subjects. Well, I don't love math, but when I teach math, I still need to be able to teach it well, even though I'm not like, oh, I love doing math. Or same with, science or whatever else. I don't think I need to love it in order to do it well. But even though I say that, even though I do enjoy reading, I don't have as much time as I used to, but I love just talking about those books and kind of sharing, getting students excited as I read aloud to them and all the things. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think about.
I know it's an interesting topic, but I would also argue, Lindsay, to your devil's advocate, I agree that at least faking it would be beneficial. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about other subjects, which I can wholeheartedly relate to, I'm not as fond of math as some people are, for example, but reading, I feel like math may not be the best example, but maybe something like science or social studies, reading is essential to learning. And so you'd be limited if you couldn't. And so that might limit your love of learning those things. I'm also thinking about how I would word this new made up standard about loving reading. And I like what you said about faking it. So I think this standard could be something like you will as a teacher, develop a love of reading or the ability to fake it to your students. Yeah. How do you measure that?
And I definitely think it's more help, but see, maybe they're just combined. I would say I want teachers to love teaching reading. I definitely want you to love teaching reading. And that can be hard because some teachers might think phonics is really boring. I think this is what happened. This is partly why we had, whole language and everything is that, teaching that phonics was just so boring. They wanted to get right to the love of reading. So, I don't know. I'm thinking oh my gosh, I love my phonics lessons. Wonder if I didn't. Well, it's the same thing. I'd have to fake it because my students get excited about phonics because I'm excited and oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Did you know that, English words don't end with V? Wow. And we have fun and we do our routines and all the things. But yeah, I don't know. Just thinking aloud here.
Yeah. It made me think also about with reading Daniel Willingham's book again, because there were many moments in there where I'm thinking, oh yeah, that just describes that so well. But there are many times along the reading journey in which you're going to need encouragement because we run into parts where it becomes more difficult, right? We get a more challenging material placed before us. We're being asked to do more things now with that material. Maybe now we're being asked to take that material, make connections, and also write. And so this is a thing that evolves over time and grows. It has many different aspects to it. And so it does require, I think, all the way along the way, somebody saying, oh yeah, this is great. This is going to be really good. We're going to be able to do this thing. It takes a lot of encouragement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Lindsay, you've made me ask another question that we can save for another time, but yeah. Do you need to like teaching reading? And maybe we like teaching reading for different reasons. Maybe. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That might be a topic for another time.
Yeah. Well, and then there's also, it's you have your preferences, even, the program you use, maybe one week you're like, oh, we're doing this story. I hate this story. And then another week you're like, oh my gosh, I love this one. This is the best. I love when we're doing Frog and Toad or whatever it is. So, and so we're probably already a little bit practiced of faking it when we need, but maybe we need to try a little harder. For me, we have this new program, there's all these knowledge topics. And so there were some topics, I remember last year was our first year. There were some topics that I was just like, this I am not excited about. And, but I'm trying to be all kind of, positive about it. And then when I looked out and I saw just certain students were just on the edge of their seats about it. And I was like, oh my gosh. And, and I remember one last year that was like, my mom's a history teacher and she loves that we're learning X, Y, Z. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was that got me even more excited. So it was a good little lesson for me because you never know what topics or things are going to really excite your students. And you want to, you want to help kind of ignite that and extend it if you can. So it was a good lesson for me to be more positive. Even if I don't like a certain topic or I'm not interested, it doesn't mean my students aren't, right? Okay, well, I think we're out of time. So, we all know that I have a lot more disagreements, but that's okay. This was a fun conversation, you guys. Thanks for bringing your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I actually maneuvered through my week thinking, what do I disagree with? What do I disagree with? And because you have almost a visceral reaction when you hear those things. So, and I'm sure I've learned a lot about myself in thinking about it. So to those of you who are listening, we'd love to hear what you disagree with. And maybe you disagree with some things we've said.
Yeah.
That's okay too. But thank you, Lindsay, for that topic. That was fun. And thanks to all of you who are listening to our podcast today. And we hope you join us for our next episode of Literacy Talks.
Thanks for joining us today. Literacy Talks comes to you from Reading Horizons, where literacy momentum begins. Visit readinghorizons.com/literacy talks to access episodes and resources to support your journey in the science of reading.